Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. I'm your host, Maggie Blume, the sales evangelist at Mailshake. And today I'm super excited to have a friend of mine on here, Mafalda Johannsen, which I hope I pronounced right. She told me. Okay,
perfect.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah. So Mafalda is a director of business development and customer success at Wonderway. She is also the host of a Day in the Life podcast or show.
Either or.
Okay. But it is where she interviews buyers to get an idea of their day to day. And I personally love that idea because I think as sales reps, we really need to get some intel from buyers and not the other way around. But Mafalda, thank you so much for being on here. Do you mind taking some time to introduce yourself?
No, thank you so much for inviting Maggie. Always a pleasure to speak with you on camera, off camera. Always a pleasure. So yeah, my name is Mafalda. It's a Portuguese name, but if you Google Mafalda, you will find a cartoon from Argentina. That's why my mother called me that. It's a great cartoon. Still don't understand why you have to name your daughter after one. So as Maggie said, I work for Wonderway, which pitch slap moment. It's a platform to help you find insights on your sales reps in terms of sales skills and then help you train them based on improvement areas. Enough of pitch slap. More about myself. I've been working in sales for a while. I've done all kind of sales from B2C, don't recommend, to B2B, from full commission only to base plus commission to everything in between. So yeah, I'm very passionate about the topic, so I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Mafalda has such an amazing background in sales, and she's in one of these unique spots where she sells to salespeople or talks with salespeople all day too, because we sell, in the sales space. So creativity has to be there just in general. And that's why Mafalda came on here today. She's done webinars about this before. And I think that a lot of her content out there is creative, just like the Day in the Life series, which everyone should go check out there too. But I saw you, just to kind of get right into it and ask a question about this. And I think it's what a lot of us kind of assume is that creativity is just like a natural talent. But I've heard you argue against that. So you've said that creativity is more of a skill than a natural talent. So could you elaborate on this for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with, there are a lot of things that people think are talents that are skills. I'm not denying the natural ability to do something. I'm just saying that many people look at musicians, for example, painters, and they're like, oh, you're so talented, when they were having fun. They were in a strict diet, for example, for you to be an opera singer. I studied music for 7 years. And one of the reasons why I never wanted to pursue opera singing is you need a strict diet for your voice to clean it up, right? So so maybe that person that sings beautifully does a strict diet that you don't do and is spending hours and months and years training that, right? I'm not saying that everyone is born with the same singing abilities. There are people that don't have classes and they sound well, even though there's always room for improvement. And you have others who need a lot of classes to sound good, right? But if you want to be a singer, you can. So that's the first misconception that people, and trust me, my partner is a musician. If you tell him you're so talented, he gets offended. Because it's like, I'm not talented. I've been doing this for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
No, that's the first misconception. And the other misconception is people also there is a misconception between arts and creativity. So you don't have to be in arts for you to be creative. Going back to the opera singing person, right? So I have a great voice. Well, I don't, but imagine I have a great voice and I do my diet and I spend my last years singing really well. It doesn't mean I'm creative though, because if I'm singing what people tell me to sing, right? I'm just practicing over and over the area, the lead, And then you go on stage and you do a beautiful show, but you didn't create the show, did you? So you can totally work in arts without being creative, and you can work in SaaS sales and being super creative. So people also sometimes mix creativity with arts, which you need creativity in arts if you're building something, but creativity is also a problem. So problem solving is part of creativity. So people who work in jobs need a lot of problem solving, they cannot say they are not creative, right? And so there are a lot of misconceptions, around the topic of creativity. And that being said, what is creativity then? And creativity, in a nutshell, is just looking at things from a different perspective and different ways. That's it. That's what creativity is in a nutshell. So, and you can actually train yourself to see things in a different way. And that's why I'm saying, you can train that. So you can train yourself to see things from different perspectives in different ways. Therefore, not natural talent, skill to be trained.
That's awesome. And really powerful what you said too, because I've never thought of it this way, is creativity is just automatically something that's artistic. And it's kind of like you said a word in there that made sense with creativity. It's building something. So you might not be the person building the entire script or the set or anything like that. And I'm not super artistic myself. That's why these words coming out of my mouth probably aren't making great sense. But yeah, it's come from the building side of things. And then also, like you said, looking at things in different light. And do you find that, just before we get into the next part here, do you find that it's hard for sales reps to have that creativity or, kind of have limiting beliefs around them?
So, you always have that, or usually you always have that sales rep or a couple sales reps that are more creative than others, right? And usually I was one of those reps, and usually people look at you and that goes back to the first question, which is, oh, you're so creative. I wish I was like that, right? And then yada, everything I just said, right? So I find that you have reps that are naturally creative in a sense that it comes easier for them, and others who don't. And usually those who are creative are the ones who reach their targets, or at least are one of the best performers. Now, the question here is why is that? Why do you have reps that are more creative than others, right? Even though we all work, for example, in tech, B2B sales, right? We are not in the artistic world. Probably that natural talent, it was trained unconsciously. So I can give you my specific case, because I cannot talk for other people. I always did very creative outreaches. I still do. So I give a lot of ideas to my SDR team. But think about my background. Yes, I studied business and I've been working in sales. I never worked in the arts world or the creative world. But I did 7 years of music school. I did 5 years of theater. I read a lot of books. I do workshops on lyrics writing, because I wrote some lyrics for a couple of songs. I learned a lot. I did workshops on also stand-up comedy. I learned from different areas. So I'm training myself.
Yeah.
So I also believe that the reps that are in contact with this kind of activities and lifestyles that empower and boost their creativity, then suddenly those are the natural talents that then thrive in sales. Think about, for example, Sarah from Gong, right? She comes from an artistic background. I think, if I'm not mistaken, she used to be a dancer or an actress. I don't want to say something wrong here, but you have a lot of that. So I think that the reps that don't struggle with creativity, usually they train without knowing that skill.
Got it. Yeah. And I think there's two things just because, I said to myself too, I'm not super creative, but there's things that help me with creativity, which we'll get into. And one part of it is, just like you said, I do research or I learn about different things besides sales, for example. I always liked to be doing something with my hands, whether it be like knitting or pottery and learning about it.
There you go.
I like to dance. Yeah, exactly. So I'm putting my mind in separate places other than business and sales and B2B.
Super
and not
important.
saying, yeah, but I think it gives you that perspective. And also something for me, I don't know if this is true with other reps out there or in your case, but creativity for me has always come in when I know something really well. So for example, 3 years ago when I started at Mailshake and I was first learning about email deliverability, I didn't feel safe being creative about it because I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to hear about these different angles about it. And now I feel like with content I post around it, I can be more creative because I've seen all these other aspects. I've talked to so many people about it. I've learned so much about it. So I feel like you're nodding your head. So I think that's kind of like, it's just looking at it from a different perspective. I think you just either need to be exposed to other subjects or learn something for a while.
I think it's both. And I think I'm happy you mentioned that, because think about a very easy example of learning how to write. You can have an extremely creative head and you could write amazing books, but if you don't know how to write, I don't know how you're going to do that. So first you'll learn how to write, then you perfect your writing. And then once you're really good at writing, you can decide if you want to write a poem, a book, an academic paper, or a sales email. The way you do that then is when creativity comes. But before that, you really need to nail the subject, or at least be comfortable at it. And also, and I'm super happy that you mentioned that in sales as well, I'm more creative now that I'm selling to salespeople than in my previous company that I was selling to director of engineers and quality assurance.
Great point.
It's much easier to be creative right now than before. I'm not going to lie, right? And the principles apply. But the fact that I really understand the subject that I'm selling, it makes it easier, quantity and quality, in both quantity and quality terms. So, I cannot agree more with what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a unique case for the both of us, because we're just talking about sales. We've been in sales and we know it really, really well. So it would probably be easier than talking with directors of engineering, but cool. I want to, I know what I love about it and what we've already touched on is that, it's not a natural talent to be creative. It really is a skill. And you even talk about it in a webinar that you do. For everyone who hasn't seen Mafalda's webinar, it's awesome. It's all about creativity, where she dive into this subject.
It's on
YouTube, a bit more.
Free for everyone. Just go and check it.
Yeah, super interesting. And what I learned is that there's actually 14 principles you talked about in that webinar of creativity. I know 14 is a lot, so could you touch on some of the most important principles when it comes to sales and what you could use there?
Absolutely. First, before I do that, I'd like to just highlight that I didn't come up with that. And I have here, that's basically Gianni Hodari, which is an Italian author. He used to write children's stories and children's books. And like me, he was very curious about the creative process. So what's going on in our minds when being creative? And in this book, he mentions a couple of principles. That's what I'm going to talk now, which are principles that helps you. And remember what I said in the beginning, creativity, seeing things from different perspectives in different ways. So which principles can we apply to do that right away? Even people who think, I'm not creative, I can't. If you apply one of these principles and suddenly, tada, surprise, you have it. So just to make it really easy for you to understand, for example, one principle is change of color. What I mean is, you have a horse, you have blue. These two things are not creative. They exist in the world. What doesn't exist is a blue horse. So when you change a color of an element, of an object, of a person, of something that usually doesn't have that color, you have something different now. And you just change one element, color, right? So you can go for example, change of velocity, right? There is a Pixar movie, Turbo, which is a snail that's fast. You can say, oh, these guys from Pixar are genius. No, they apply the very simple principle, which is they change the velocity of an element. A snail is never, ever in this world fast, but fast things exist, right? So a fast Ferrari, there is nothing innovative there, right? But a fast snail, that's quite different. So there are a couple of things that you can change and change the complete set right away. Change of location. So in my webinar, I give the example. Imagine that you have the Lion King story in a zoo. Nothing else is different. So you have the uncle that is jealous that the prince that's not king feels left aside, blah, 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 wants to kill the brother. Sure. Let's change just the location. And that implies a lot of just for that change, you have to change a lot of things in the story, right? Even like if you do creative writing courses, you will see that all stories obey to a certain, it's the same thing over and over and over and over. You just change the elements. So there are a lot of stories of like jealous brothers for some reason that try to kill, or they do, and then they get revenge in the end and then happy ending, right? That's not like King. It's like most of the stories, right? But then what you change? You change location. You change the characters. You change the color, the space in time, and suddenly you have a new story. But if you go deep, most stories, they are very, very alike. So try that. Like I always say, after my webinar, if you really think you're not creative, just change one element of something really obvious, like look at your bed and think, what else can I do with my bed? Like that's, for example, the brooms that witches use. It's a broom to clean the house. You change the function, right? Yeah. And then suddenly you have something different, right? So do that. Look at an object that you have in your room and find a completely crazy function for it and think the implications. You had the creative thought right there.
Awesome. So it really comes down to changing, an element or thinking about it differently. And those are some easy exercises you can just do on a daily basis of, seeing if something could change color, velocity, or, just the location that it's in. And so how do you practice this in sales then, Mafalda?
So there are two things, right? How do you practice this and how do you apply in sales? So how do you practice? So I'll go for the first one, which is how do you practice? There are a lot of ways to practice. First, if you're conscious about it, and if you do that like every day, every week, you'll see that the more you do, it's practice, right? So the more you do, the easier it comes. That's the same with everything, sales, sports, arts, cooking, dating, whatever, the more you do, the better you get at it. Yeah. So that's the basic principle for everything. But also like there are many ways you can like spark that creativity. Reading, keeping a creative journal. There are days you're more inspired than others. I have days nothing comes to mind no matter what. But there are days I have like 5 of them. Write down. It's not useful now. It will be useful later. Research. Like you mentioned research, Maggie, that you do a lot of research. That's great to spark creativity. Talk with your colleagues. Maybe they have an idea that gives you another idea that gives you another idea. So take a walk with no podcast, no music, no nothing. Unplug social media, delete social media as much as you can. Like these kind of things really helps you spark creativity, both for sales and non-sales. Then in sales, so I apply a lot of the principles. For example, I wrote an email, but in a poem format. So that's change of substance. For example, if you look at it, I applied one principle. So poems exist in this world. Sales emails exist. I just joined the two of them, right? So you have a principle right there that you can apply, for example.
I love that. Yeah. It's thinking about, even just like the 3 things in sales that most people do: sales emails, cold calls, LinkedIn messages, or social selling. Like, how can you make some of that different? And like you did in your situation, you did a poem, and I know some people kind of change it now with like they send a voice recording on LinkedIn. that kind of, that was creative at first, and LinkedIn allowed you to do it, but it was a different format of, you weren't used to hearing someone talk in your LinkedIn inbox.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's the same message, but a different way to send it. Mm-hmm. So you change something. You change your perspective or the way you do things.
Yeah. And I love that too, for those tips on, how you practice it. So whether you go on a walk where you have no distractions, and I know that always helps me, or I'm a shower person where I think of the best ideas after a shower when I need to run on my phone. Yeah.
Shower is the best place for me to get ideas to. It's crazy. And also, going back to sales, if the more you learn about different things in the world, then the more creative you are. Because think about it, from what we just mentioned in the beginning, being creative is a new perspective, right? For you to have so it's as a junction of things in the world, a color, a location with an element. The more elements you have in your head, the more knowledge you have, the more combinations you can make. So I can give you a very simple example. If you go on a LinkedIn profile of, I don't know, your persona, whatever that is, and he or she writes on LinkedIn, on my free time, I like to listen to singer or band, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. If you don't know the singer or the band, how will you create an email referring them?
Yeah.
You can't, right? Mm-hmm. But if you know the band or the style of music, that's valuable information for you to add to your email. Think how this will tie to your solution, make it relevant, and send it out. So the more information you have about the world, non-sales related, the more elements you're going to have in your head to use in your creative process.
Yeah. And I love that, because there's principles and a science behind this, and something that doesn't make you feel lost of, hey, I need to be creative. Because I know a lot of what sales managers out there are preaching, and even Jed on our team, who's head of outbound, teaches frameworks. Hey, this is a framework where you can book a meeting. But it's putting some creativity behind it, putting some tactics to it. So it's hey, at the end of the day, we have this framework. And that framework actually is a helpful guide, because like you said, in your case, it's changing an element of it. And everyone wants to do pattern interrupts now, which is creativity at the end of the day. So it's
the framework.
Having this, exactly.
Make creativity a framework. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly, I'm very glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly what made me start these webinars and trainings on creativity. It's because a lot of people, the teams I was training, they'll come to me and said, "You're so creative. How do you do that?" And I didn't have the answer. I was like, well, I look at the LinkedIn profile and I just write a creative email.
That's it.
And this doesn't help anyone. It only motivates people. It's cool, thanks for nothing. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing, is okay, what's going on in my head? So how can I make what's going on in my head a framework, what you mentioned, that my teams can apply without feeling frustrated? And that's what I was starting. I did workshops, I read books like this one and others, and finally I can have a framework to share that anyone can apply to be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're happy you did it, because I think a lot of us were feeling lost. And that's why I'm happy that I stumbled upon your webinar too, of these principles of creativity and how you've done your own work with creativity too, because it's something that anyone can do out there. It's just takes a little bit of extra, research, or exposing yourself to other elements out there too, or just different areas of study and training.
It's like your first email, right? And I know you do these tear downs, use these emails, and email is your specialty as well, Maggie. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me that nowadays you are as fast as you were 3 years ago when you started Mailshake, when you write an email. I'm not. Nowadays, I write a prospecting email in 1 minute with a quality that 3 years ago it would take me 1 hour and maybe not even be close to it, right? Because you practice over and over and over again.
Yeah, it comes with that practice, and now the knowledge that we have behind it too, of, hey, this is what sort of worked in the past, let's just change this one thing after. And I have this whole book and guide of myself of things I've practiced in the past. But awesome. I loved this conversation and being able to talk with you about creativity, Mafalda. Before we finish up here, where can people learn more about you, learn more about the creative process there too?
Sure. So LinkedIn, as I mentioned 5 minutes ago, I don't really use social media, so I don't have Instagram, I don't have TikTok. I really recommend people not to have it, to be honest. I'm not gonna, give a huge talk about social media, but besides LinkedIn, not really my thing. I still have a Facebook account. Don't use it. So definitely LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, as Maggie mentioned at the beginning, I'm doing this series of events, A Day in the Life of, which are basically me interviewing Brian personas and having a very brutal and honest talk with them. So it's a lot of fun. So you can find that on YouTube. You can find that on the LinkedIn of my company, Wonderway, or on our company's website. So so those are the ways to find me. It's pretty easy. Mafalda Johannsen is a very uncommon name, so.
Awesome. Well, Mafalda told you where you can learn more about creativity or listening or watching A Day in the Life, which I'm excited to dig in a little bit more on. But Mafalda, thank you so much for being here today. And
my pleasure.
And thanks everyone for watching another episode of Shake Sales. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Ciao, ciao. Have a good one.
You too.